War spirals from many origins. Wealth, fame, power, territory, the list really goes on and on and on. Now, many of our real wars sadly spiral outwards from a single rash decision, like assassinating Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and then they just never quite stop based on, a lot of different very bad interests. But in Magic the Gathering, one of the greatest wars ever in the entire lore started not from hatred, but ingenuity. Today, I want to tell you the very fascinating story of the Brothers' War, and I think it might just be my new favorite part of all Magic the Gathering lore. Two brothers consumed by progress who drifted into quite different ways of darkness. And it all started with two stones, and it ended with the multiverse itself shattering. Oh, and also a bowl, which is way more insane than it might sound at the moment. And ironically, this war then setting up an even greater one across the multiverse, the Phyrexian invasion. This massive event is known as the Antiquities War, or more commonly known as the Brothers' War. And today, you and I are gonna explore the Brothers' War in detail together. A little bit of a change of pace from my usual Planeswalker content here, but it's still full of some insane stakes, twists, and just crazy magic lore that I didn't know about before researching for this video. The epic clash of Urza and Mishra, full of drama, affairs, betrayal, and nuclear allegories. Yeah, it's gonna get pretty rowdy, so let's get after it. The World-Splitting Stone. This story, as many stories in Magic do, begins on the plane of Dominaria within the ancient Thran ruins scattered across the continent of Terisier. Here we punch in on two very gifted apprentices, the brothers Urza and Mishra, the two who studied under Tokasia and were currently engaged in a hunt for ancient machines. Ancient machine artifacts from the Thran, to be specific. And this conflict starts very deep inside the caves of Koilos, ruins of advanced technology discovered deep within an archaeological dig site. Now, while in the modern times of Magic, we've seen many crazy events occur, such as a Johnny's Last Stand or the defeat of Karn, before all of that, the caves of Koilos served as the birthplace of the Brothers' War. Inside of it, Urza and Mishra unearthed a power stone, and as brothers do, they fought over it, how siblings do, right? I once fought my siblings over the powers of space, time, and dark matter because I am Giratina. Now, it was an artifact of immense power, this stone, and they both wanted it very badly. So badly, they accidentally split it in half. These two chunks of rock then would later become known as the Might Stone and the Weak Stone. Each brother claimed one half, Urza with the Might Stone and Mishra with the Weak Stone. But of course, both also believed that the other was undeserving of their missing piece, and this seed, this conflict for the other half of this ancient powerful artifact is what would blossom into despair for Dominaria and ultimately the entire Magic universe. The two started to clash, and their conflict escalated to the point that it led to the death of their mentor, Tokasia. The energy hidden inside these stones was really great, and this is who I personally believe is the first victim of the Brothers' War long before it ever gained its name. Urza and Mishra, though, did not really linger too long in grief. Instead, they marched forward towards even greater progress. But for the first time in their lives, they were now no longer together. Urza's Ascent. You might already know some of this from my video on Urza, but Urza from here on out made his way towards the kingdom of Yotia, a government built on the business of war. It was a military nation through and through. It was a place where systems mattered and navigating them rewarded you dearly. And luckily, Urza really was good at understanding systems. Like, he really understood them. He began his great artificing journey here as a clocksmaker's apprentice, refining delicate mechanisms and perfecting the flow of motion through gears and springs. As you can kind of tell, in these controlled sort of environments is where Urza really thrived. He'd previously discovered great Thran artifacts, and now he was the one in the driver's seat creating stuff, and he absolutely thrived. Very soon after, the king of this nation, Bin Krug, announced a public challenge. Any man who would be able to move an immense jade statue across his palace's courtyard would win the hand of his daughter, Kayla Bin Krug, which I gotta say is a very silly but yet very powerful name. Now, in classic fairy tale fashion, suitors came from all over attempting to flaunt their muscle and talent to no avail, but young Urza of course knew that it was his mind that was required to win this, and so Urza built a machine, and the court watched in astonishment and shock as the immovable object glided across the stone. Now, quite genuinely, I want to say, I think this is such a subtle and great way to just explain Urza's character overall. Props to, well, whoever wrote that chunk of Urza's story originally. Jeff Grubb? Like, I know he wrote the original Brothers War novel, but I'm kind of unsure when this lore was actually birthed, like, in the actual storyline. Who knows? Regardless, it's a great detail, I think, for him to use his engineering skills in such a simple yet very powerful way. And as a result, yes, Urza actually married Kayla, but not for the reason you or I would originally like to think, because Kayla was beautiful, smart, kind, and of course also destined for greatness, but Urza simply wanted a Thran tome in her possession, since knowledge mattered way more to him than beauty or romance. Brother here is locked in on the science, so much so that on their wedding night, while the kingdom celebrated union, Urza, instead of, having a time with his newlywed wife, instead withdrew to his study, and that absence and abstinence would define their marriage and is actually gonna be very important to this video. You see, Kayla was very intelligent, observant, and politically quite perspective. She learned court politics, diplomatic nuance, and the art of influence within constrained spaces, becoming a mighty leader of Yotia. And now, as its chief artificer, Urza started reshaping the kingdom too, not like with his hands, but of course with his mind and skills. He modernized the entire nation, developed standardized manufacturing techniques, and created artifact soldiers that could march without ever getting tired. In fact, you probably use a bunch in your colorless commander deck, you sick freak. A colorless commander deck. I should kind of build one of those. That sounds actually pretty fun. As time passed, Kayla watched as her husband's ambition hardened into something even colder. But around this time, Kayla and Urza both started to see the other for what they actually were. A woman worth loving and a man riddled with guilt. You see, Urza was struggling with the fact that in the background, he was responsible, indirectly at least, for killing Kayla's father, who dies throughout the years in the warring conflict with Mishra. Now, the timeline here is a little bit clunky, but needless to say, there was some actual emotion here. It was not perfect, but love began to really blossom. Mishra's descent. Let's shift over to the other brother. Mishra's path was, well, a little bit darker, to say the least. He was plagued by recurring dreams that dragged him back towards the caves of Koilos. And as he wandered into the desert, he found himself captured by the Suwardi, a militant faction among the Falaji tribes. As a result of this, his weak stone was taken from him, and the mighty Mishra was reduced to a laborer beneath a relentless sun. But Mishra was nothing if not, well, lucky, because enter Hajar, a man who, like Urza and like Mishra, had once studied at Tokasia's camp. Hajar remembered Mishra as brilliant and daring, not defeated, and Hajar knew that Mishra's knowledge could strengthen the entire Falaji people. And so in a very clutch move, Hajar persuaded the Qadir, the leader of the Suwardi, to take Mishra in as one of their own, and as a result, Mishra was appointed as a sort of tutor to the Qadir's son. Now, this was a very modest position, of course, but it was more honest work, and most importantly, it put Mishra into the proximity of power, which matters a lot more, as we will see. Take notes, kids, as this is how you actually rise to power. Also, take notes on all the proper nouns from my last little chunk here. I dropped a lot of the key terms that you will want to know. So, just digest it, rewatch it if you have to. Because from here on out, Mishra started observing tribal structures, internal rivalries, and ultimately saw opportunities for a new order. Very much unlike his brother Urza, who built systems from within an already established hierarchy, Mishra saw the power of spectacle. More so, he saw how easily rising to power would be if he had a moment of glory, which of course he manufactured in the form of the dragon engine, or as the Falaji tribe call it, the Makfawa. Add that to your key terms. So this Makfawa erupted from beneath the sands, this beautiful and terrifying mechanical monstrosity. It tore through the camp, slaughtering the Qadir, and chaos reigned. At least until Mishra actually reclaimed the Weak Stone, and in doing so, he discovered something really extraordinary. He could now command the engine, and thus he subdued that beast, becoming Mishra, tamer of Makfawa. And everything has a little bit of a Dune flavor to this, I gotta say. But anyways, after the Qadir's death, his son, Mishra's student, ascended and in a very kind homie move, appointed Mishra as Raki, chief wizard and strategist. And now, with the dragon engine's terrifying presence, Mishra unified all of the Falaji tribes under the Suwardi. And it was actually during this consolidation that Ashnot, who has my favorite altar, entered the scene too. Don't really know how or exactly when, but it happened vaguely around this time in the story. Ashnot's, by the way, actually a really sick character, and she might probably be my favorite person I've learned about by diving deep into the Brothers' War, and that's because Ashnot was a brilliant and pragmatic young woman. A little bit cold, but there was a beating heart somewhere in here. One that absolutely worshipped Mishra. In other words, another great villain sidekick to add to my personal list of favorites. You see, Hajar believed in Mishra's potential for absolute greatness. That's why he came in real clutch here, but Ashnot believed in Mishra's raw, true power. She absolutely admired effectiveness. If something worked, it did deserve more refinement in her eyes. And Mishra, boy, did that man work. I'd personally say that uniting several warring tribes under one banner and waging war with the Makfawa is, at its bare minimum, pretty effective. I'd even argue it's super effective, and so under Mishra and Ashnot's hands, dragon engines started evolving. And as Mishra's influence started expanding, so too did whispers of darker knowledge filtering throughout his camp. Rumors of Phyrexian technologies, rumors of enhancements beyond mere machinery. In other words, yes, something really spooky. War is coming. By now in their stories, the two brothers were not simply rivals, they were full-on warring leaders. What basically had begun as a personal grievance and squabble over a particularly powerful rock, then hardened into ideology and identity, which absolutely snowballed into them leading entire nations. Urza's new version of Yotia was engineered for war. Very American of you, I gotta say, since I've been focused on Mishra. Just a reminder that Urza made like a lot of crazy machines and innovations for Yotia and like a whole artificial army. Meanwhile, Mishra's forces started evolving, let's say, differently. Dragon engines were no longer these sort of isolated terrors that you could find somewhere rarely in the desert sands. Again, in a very Lisan al-Gaib way, actually looking at Mishra now, it's absolutely giving crazy Dune energy, right? Like just instead of sandworms, the Shait Hulut, we've now got dragon engines, and in the back, Phyrexia. I assume that might have been intentional, which is actually kind of a rad detail. May they artifice chip and shatter, I guess. Anyhow, the dragon engines went from beasts feared to now new symbols of the newly unified Falaji strength. And war was coming, it was pretty much inevitable. But it wasn't exactly sudden. Now, I actually think that there's not enough credit here given to the lore that Wizards has given us. I think people kind of tend to assume, or sorry, at the very least, I did assume that the proper Antiquities or Brothers' War was just like a thing that happened because the two guys were really angry at each other, but no, there was actually a brief era of actual peace talks. There wasn't immediate conflict. Yotia and the Falaji were attempting real negotiations and trying to coexist. As a result of this, the individuals in charge of these great powers actually met up. Players like Urza, Mishra, Kyla, and Hajar were actually caught in a vicious chess match Game of Thrones thing, waiting for an accepted gambit or a moment to call a draw, and Kyla, out of all of them, was the one who really blundered. You see, in Yotia, Kyla's isolation was kind of deepening as politics became increasingly tense here. Her father's passing had put her at the helm, and while her and Urza were a real couple at this point, diplomatic exchanges between Yotia and the Falaji envy grew more and more sharp. And that was when Kyla met Mishra. Kyla immediately clocked Mishra's entire vibe. He was Urza's brother, alright, but there was a clear difference in how they actually held themselves. Mishra was intense, very charismatic, and fully present in the moment. Also, I guess he was kind of hot. The way that he moved, the way that he spoke, the decisions he made. They were very different than that of his brother. Like, Urza's mind was often several moves ahead, but Mishra's choices were immediate. Ultimately, the key difference here was that Mishra spoke with passion and not his, robotic calculation that Urza had, and Mishra had an immediate goal. He wanted to rise in power, and to do that, he needed what?
Great.
Yes, the Might Stone, and Kyla was his key. Their affair was pretty brief. One night of passion, Kyla's greatest weakness exploited by Mishra, not being loved enough by her husband. Ouch. He convinced her that he just needed Urza's Might Stone, and all this needless conflict could come to an immediate end, and so she obliged. She retrieved it, but Urza caught them both. Now, I don't know if Urza actually felt betrayed or in his calculations he actually blamed himself for being a shitty husband and brother, but he knew what he needed to do next here. Mishra had gone way too far, and Falaji would pay the ultimate price. Alright, now, I really need to take a moment here because this is an absolutely insane moment in the lore for me because A, I totally did not expect the brothers' war to start over an affair. That's some serious Shakespearean drama level stuff that I did just not anticipate, but also I kind of feel like it totally really showcased the vibe difference between Urza and Mishra in a way that felt fairly easy to understand. And I don't remember what B was, but I guess B can just be back to the drama because it got much, much worse from there on out because Kyla now was pregnant. Yes, Kyla gave birth to her son, Harbin. Now, on paper and in the eyes of the public, he was of course Urza's son, but in private, well, we kind of know the issue here. There was a pretty decent chance that it was not actually Urza's son, but in fact his nephew. They did share a resemblance, and straight up, it was way better for the drama. And as a result, Urza treated Harbin as duty, not as a real son. Harbin was an heir to the throne that needed to be raised upright, but Kyla treated him as everything. But unfortunately for Harbin, war then escalated and he would not be rewarded with a normal life. Poor guy, crazy family. Now, just to be real with you, it's kind of unclear between the different canons if Harbin was alive or still cooking up in the crotchpot of life, but regardless, very near the time of his birth, Mishra assaulted Krug, the capital of Yotia. He absolutely decimated it with his powerful dragon engines. Urza failed to defend against Traxos, the massive dragon engine designed to level his entire city. A cityscape leveler. Mishra assaulted the city, having planned for this day ever since his failed robbery and Night of Passion. Maybe he couldn't steal the Might Stone, but he still could destroy everything that Urza had built and cherished. Now, the Yotians, to be fair, fought very bravely, but they could not withstand Mishra's pure force of destruction. Kyla and Harbin managed to escape, planning for their future, but this was the moment that the brothers' war spiraled into some absolute senseless destruction. Terisier became a chessboard of sorts, with Urza and Mishra being the kings, or I guess maybe more like the queens if we want to talk about power levels, right? I'm just now realizing I've been making a lot of chess analogies in the script for some reason. They were commanders, and their nations were their 100 card decks. Ha! Anyways, you get it. They both waged countless military campaigns against each other, each creating more and more crazy levels of destruction. The Corruption of Mishra. And then the third party arrived to the party. Not Mishra, not Urza, but Gix. And to be real, man, Gix is a little bit of a freak. He is very unsettling in all senses of the word. He was a Phyrexian demon, lieutenant to Yawgmoth, the Phyrexian god, former Thran. And if you're confused as to how he is gonna be relevant in the brother's story, I need to take you back to the very start of this thing. You see, inside the caves of Koilos, the brothers split the Might Stone and the Weak Stone, but what they didn't fully realize is that Thran, its ancient advanced technology, the thing that they were studying, it was all tied to the plane of Phyrexia. And as it turns out, there exists a portal between Phyrexia and Dominaria inside the caves of Koilos, and Gix was tasked with sowing more chaos and in the process reassembling the stone by any means necessary for Yawgmoth so that Dominaria could one day be invaded by the Phyrexians again. And so the Brotherhood of Gix, yes, more brother stuff, actually began their move. The brothers clashing with their stones briefly opened the portal, allowing Gix's influence to sneak through and begin to rise in power deep inside the shadows. He took over some monks through their dreams, I don't know how, convinced them to reopen the portal somehow in the caves of Koilos, and then he was able to step through physically himself. Turns out, by the way, funnily, that these monks actually worshipped Gix completely separately of that story. They worshipped him from his time as an ancient Thran person before he swore loyalty to Yawgmoth and moved to Phyrexia. They just kind of like worshipped him because he was cool and rad, and he realized this after scanning their minds, just like a totally convenient thing that I found very funny as a coincidence to write into the lore. I don't know, I thought you'd find it amusing too. Gix then started intervening in the brothers' war, shaping Mishra's ambition. He first tried to defeat him, but I think before Mishra realized it, Gix had already stopped, realizing the Weak Stone would not allow him to ever win. So Gix instead became a puppet master. He didn't demand loyalty or anything, he just simply entered as a dark hand, enhancing Mishra and the dragon engines. As a result, the dragon engines started to grow more and more grotesque. Under the new Phyrexian influence, components once considered experimental became the standard. Machine and organic material intertwining in a disgusting harmony. My girl Ashnot here, mind you, was all about this. She adopted faster than pretty much anyone else, but at the same time, a wedge was kind of forming between Mishra and her, and the Phyrexians took that spot as Mishra's console and pushed her out, and actually, Ashnot was then banished. Now, Hajar was still Mishra's best bud, but even he started to get shoved out of private matters such as Mishra's lung disease. Mishra, yes, had gotten real sick, and the Phyrexian priests could solve that, modifying him. And you know what that means. Mishra was completed. By the time that the Phyrexian influence had fully claimed Mishra, he was really more construct than brother. Gix was his new master, and eventually, Yawgmoth would be as well. Argoth's fall. I'm now gonna skip ahead a little bit to the final confrontation that unfolded on Argoth, a lush island protected by Titania. Yay, Titania, ramping. She's very rad herself, I love her, and I do wish that she was a bigger part of the story, because I like talking about her, but her home was the site of the final battle, and I'd say that's fairly important at the very least, so we'll make it count. Now, Argoth was this beautiful, natural safe haven, really. Nothing like the mechanical beast that the country had become pretty much anywhere else, so naturally, it had to be ruined. Funnily enough, it was Urza first who, with his artifact legions, marched into the Green Sanctuary, trampling its grounds, and opposing them, Mishra's dragon engines followed, roaring and burning the lush landscape. Forests burned, elementals fell, and it was as if the land itself was another actor in the battle, since Titania was summoning the nature's fury to fight against both the brothers, to very little success, sadly. And then Urza finally himself confronted Mishra and saw what Phyrexia had made of him. His brother's features were all distorted. Was he machine or man? Or was he both? This was unsettling, wrong, and most importantly, way more powerful than Urza could ever be. The Might Stone and the Weak Stone clashed, but in this moment, the deciding factor was that Mishra was just stronger than Urza. But there was something that happened in the background, the result of Mishra's behavior, that eventually became his own undoing. During the assault on Krug earlier, an artificer named Lauren of the Third Path, who loves destroying artifacts and enchantments, who worked under Urza's mentor Tokasia, was researching a powerful artifact whose power was truly unknown, and you actually will recognize it because it's in her cart. It was machine and magic, something absolutely unheard of. It was the Golgothian Silix. Now Lauren, of course, as you can imagine, escaped the assault on Krug but was injured, and eventually the Silix was stolen from her by none other than Ashnot. Ashnot then created a fake Silix, Ashnot Silix, and gave it to the Phyrexians to fool them as they wanted the Silix's true power, and it was a Trojan Silix all along. How clever! Good on you, Ashnot, my girl. And then, due to all of Mishra's bad behavior and mistreatment of Ashnot, Ashnot made a very bold and very bitter choice. Ashnot gave the Silix to Tawnos, Urza's apprentice. Fun fact, apparently Tawnos and Ashnot had their own little Romeo and Juliet side plot going on and were secretly in love, so when confronted by Gix, Ashnot gave the Silix to Tawnos, Tawnos gave it to Urza, and Urza, during a moment of intense conflict, had the most powerful tool he had ever laid his hands on, without any clue whatsoever on how to actually use it. But in absolute desperation, after also awakening his own Planeswalker spark, Urza activated the Golgothian Silix successfully. His blood trickled down from his head, a wound given to him by his brother, and the runes of the Silix filled and light started to erupt from it. This event would become known as the Silix Blast, an event that instantly ended the Brothers' War. The blast annihilated Argoth and rippled into the multiverse like a nuclear explosion of magical proportion. Armies vanished in white blinding light, and the dragon engines just disintegrated. This blast tore through the world, the sky, the fabric of existence itself, sending shockwaves across Dominaria. Seasons faltered, temperatures plummeted, and a global ice age began. The Wake. After Argoth, the war ended, but its devastation shaped a new future. A future that needed to now deal with an ice age, multiversal divide, and do so with Urza out of the picture, since after the Silix Blast, he was nowhere to be found. Kyla ruled through devastation, and with Urza gone into the multiverse, planeswalking and battling the Phyrexians, Kayla was, left to clean up her lover's mess. She raised Harbin and tried to protect him from the true nature of his own birth, and Urza, now a planeswalker, devoted himself to preparing for the return of Phyrexia. They had destroyed his home, his family, his brother, even though they were already on bad terms, and they were a twisted power, and Yawgmoth would pay for his intervention. And if you want to actually know how Urza's crusade against the Phyrexian went and what happened afterwards to his story and Dominaria, I detail everything in this video right here. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoy a video like this. That's a little bit more detailing a history and event in Magic the Gathering. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.